This program is designed to provide general information with regards to the subject matters covered. This information is given with the understanding that neither the hosts, guests, sponsors, or station are engaged in rendering any specific and personal, medical, financial, legal, counseling, professional service, or any advice. You should seek the services of competent professionals before applying or trying any suggested ideas.
Good morning, True Seekers and True Crime Junkies. Welcome back to another episode of Hit the Road Jack, Finding the Zodiac. I'd like to welcome to the show today, Nolan Del Campo.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning. All right, so of course we always like to move right on. Ooh, let's go back. My fingers got skippy. I actually decided to bring up those questions that they were asking for Covered California in regards to how they were going to gauge, I guess, or base what my premiums should be, just because I thought it was interesting. Now, I was under the impression that they weren't allowed to ask you about previous conditions. Am I wrong on that?
I don't know. I think they can ask you. I mean, do you have to disclose? I would think so.
I would think that you would have to be honest. So if they're asking
Right.
the question, and you're pretty much supposed to answer. But I was under the impression once Obamacare come into play, then it wasn't supposed to be a scenario of, oh, how sick are you? And we're going to charge you separately or differently from blah, 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 blah. I mean, because granted, all of these people like myself that are not using medical care on a regular basis, where are our premiums going to if that isn't to subsidize these other individuals? Right? Yeah. I mean, so basically the questions that they had on here was choose the level based on group 2, which I still don't even understand what group 1 and group 2 is. But either way, in both groups, they ask the same questions. And it says member with the most, group 2 member with the most healthcare needs. If you do not answer, we will use medium use. So they're going to throw you right in here to 4 to 5 doctor visits that includes tests and treatment if you don't answer these questions. So they're already going to hit you with something if you don't answer. But I'm also sure you're supposed to answer honestly. So your choices are low use, 1 doctor visit and test, preventative services 2. That's basically your annual checkups just to make sure you don't have breast cancer, cervical cancer, prostate cancer, these kind of things. And then maybe you see the doctor once a year because you got a cold or a virus or something else that you need some meds for. Medium use is 4 to 5 doctor visits that includes tests and treatment. High use is surgery or outpatient treatment, a number of doctor visits and tests. And very high use is a hospital stay, outpatient. It's blurry for me taking a picture off my computer. Outpatient treatment, a number of doctor visits and tests. And then they move on to what level prescription drug use will work best for group 2 in 2025. Choose the level based on the group 2 member with the most prescriptions. If you do not answer, once again, we will use medium use. Medium use is 1 to 2 prescriptions each month. Low use is 2 to 3 prescriptions during the year or brief illness, which that's pretty much what I fall into. Medium use, 1 to 2 prescriptions each month. High use, 3 prescriptions each month, often higher cost drugs. And then very high use, you're having like 4 to 5 prescriptions a year. And I think that's where they would have put my dad with diabetes, or somebody with congestive heart failure or these types of issues. Either way, I didn't think they were allowed to ask you these type of questions. I also feel like this is some type of a HIPAA violation. I shouldn't have to disclose my medical history to anybody, period. And even if it is blanketed with how many uses do you have? One does indicate something, whereas another doesn't, right? Low use doesn't indicate much, but very high use indicates that you have a lot of medical issues. I don't know. Thank goodness. Anyways, um, while I was doing my YouTube work this week and putting up, posting things on social media, I got this little message over here on the left-hand side, and it's asked me to monetize basically this reel. It wanted me to put this reel up in order to make money off of it. And the entry to it is: the shocking theory is Katy Perry, JonBenet Ramsey. Now, of all the things that we talked about, and I made very light of the whole Katy Perry thing being like the ultimate conspiracy theorist's idea or thought that JonBenet didn't really die, and autopsy photos are fake. Parents went through all of that because she sold JonBenet to Hollywood, and now she is Katy Perry. All right, so I figured I was going to settle some things for people, so I threw up a whole bunch of pictures here. If we will take note to Katy Perry actually being a brunette, not a blonde. The other thing that really got me, and they always say ears never change, right? You go with the ears you were born with. If the men, they get a little bit larger over the years, but for the most part, your ears don't morph into something else. They don't grow into something different, and the styles of your, or the shape of your ears, pretty much consistent. I kind of felt for a minute there for JonBenet, because as I was looking at her ears, poor thing has got a set of ears like my daughter. And you pull her hair back, and boy, those things are just whoop, 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 whoop. So you can see these ears, right? I mean, they're great, big, huge, sticking out from the side of her head right there. But then you look at Carrie Patey, Perry's ears, and look, hers actually incline back and move back towards the head. They're definitely a completely different shape. They don't fan out, they fan back, and even the shapes of them are different. So I thought if there was anything we could take from this, is that those are not the same ears. These are not the same people. Just a thought. And I would never have allowed them to monetize or attempt to put up a reel that says something as stupid as that, as if I'm going to question the public or even create this kind of misinformation in people by wanting to monetize something that alludes to a theory that isn't even true. It's just, that's idiocy.
Right.
That's media at its finest. All right, so back to JonBenet. Of course, I wanted to look at this particular knot on the garret. So I brought up several different pieces of the information that was on here. This article, or this was off of the documentary. It says the maid never saw parachute cord in the house. But what we have that's made the garret is actually a parachute cord. We can see a portion of the paintbrush down here that was left behind. So evidently this was a much longer brush, and it was snapped into three pieces: the piece that was attached to the garret, the piece that was left behind, and the piece that was used to actually sexually abuse her was not found. Not in the house. I know, gross. And it says right here, end of paintbrush was never found. So we're missing various parts. A, where did this parachute cord come from? B, where did that third part of that paintbrush go to? I also noted, because we've talked about garrets before in these presentations, and this is the 1949 Louise Springer autopsy photo showing a pre-cut clothesline rope used by the suspect. Now, clothesline back in the day, long before it was the plastic hollow tube or plastic with fiber, with plastic fiber filler, in order to strengthen it, there was an actual line or rope that was used for clothesline cord. But we talked about this clothesline thing all the way up through Sandy Betts, where she had a clothesline go missing from her backyard, a new one placed on her front porch. Like, she talks a lot about how she's being tormented and taunted by the Zodiac and this clothesline that's involved. But when I go back through many of these, even the Lake Berryessa murders, they were pre-cut pieces of rope that were used. And we know that we have Jack's son, Charles, talking about how Jack had 2 to 3 foot lengths of pre-cut rope in his trunk. Nothing long enough to tie something down with, but to tie someone up with. Right?
Is Sandy Betts the lady we visited one time?
Yes.
In Antioch?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
And of course, unfortunately, some of her information I found, like the map that she gave me, she claimed to have had left either in her mailbox or in the back of her car. I don't know. She's supposedly had evidence left by the Zodiac in so many places. But after I reviewed the handwriting on that map, it was coincidentally very consistent with hers. And she's the only one to have ever received a map like this. I mean,
Right.
Why would he give her a map and not send it to law enforcement? Why would he taunted law enforcement, not individuals.
Yeah. Well,
So
she seems to maintain that she's being stalked, right?
Yes. Yeah, and she may very well have been. She was a gorgeous gal, boy. She was like Queen of the
Back in her
Derby type.
day.
Yeah. And of course, that's when she was working at the bar or working as a server. And of course, coming into contact, I'm sure, with a lot of pervy men who were wanting her attention for whatever the purpose was. So Laundry and Research, they described this knot on the Garrett as a skilled, specialized, technical knot making, something an 8-year-old couldn't have done. And then, of course, JonBenet Ramsey was alive when it was used on her. So that would exclude, I always go back to, they tried to say they hit her on the head, but we've been shown through the autopsy that the blow to the head came after the strangulation. There were 2 bouts of strangulation, and at least one of them, JonBenet had gotten her own skin cells underneath her fingernail trying to get the rope off of her throat. So she obviously was a little fighter.
Yeah.
So that the Burke theory falls short, which, excludes the parents by logic in that theory. This type of knot requires training, they say, but I'm looking at this knot and I'm not really seeing a lot of training behind it. But it would take some knowledge of how to get that rope to stay tight enough to be able to use it as a Garrett to strangle somebody. Let's see. Burke.
So was there one on the other end then? And then they just, use it as a handle?
Because it's cut in these pictures. So this is the Garrett up here after it's been removed. I'm not sure what part of it or where the actual wood was attached to. It looks like maybe over to this end, but we see also these 2 loops. So I'm highly confused about this whole setup here, and how a single stick could create a Garrett. But then again, I'm not a Garrett maker.
You would think you'd want 2 sticks, one at each
right.
end.
Right. You'd think you'd want something, or at least like some type of a noose type setup where the rope would slide when you pulled, and it seemed to me almost as if they would have had to have twisted it, even if they had, let's say, 2 sticks.
Efficient as having 2 sides.
I know. So yes, I'm definitely confused by it. Let's see. The parents would have rushed. Okay. Yeah. So, oh yes. So I did go, and I'm thinking Navy, right? Because of Jack being in the Navy, although we know he was also in the Air Force. And I'm not sure what type of knots they learned to tie in the Air Force versus the Navy, but I had been on a hot search for many years looking for this specialized knot and everything. And I know this might be a little hard to see, but some of them up here, you can see where they make slip knots. Some of them you could see, pretty fanciful, like latticing done with knots, different types that crisscross almost like a pretzel. Any one of these ones that I looked at, though, were nothing consistent. So these are all maritime knots that were at a restaurant, and they had several pictures of it. So here's another one. Again, it's behind glass, so getting, clear shots of it was a little complicated, but I could still see the makings of many of these knots and which directions they go, how they're assembled. Of course, not many of them had anything going in between them. In order to support or to prove that this was some type of a specialized knot. Here's some that are a little bit clearer. We see this one that actually has something going in between it, but again, doesn't look anything like what we're looking at on the Garrett.
No.
That one has something going in between it. That one. Again, I still think we're looking for something that it would have to have slip. It would have to, I don't know. This one I found also had something going through it, but you could see how it only has one rope going around the actual piece of wood itself with the knots on the side. Again, doesn't even remotely look close to that. I did find this while I was doing some research this week, and it talks about blood samples, and this is why the family was excluded. And I found this to be extremely interesting because this is how they figure there's an outside intruder. So if they know this, why do they keep perpetuating the idea that the Ramseys are responsible or allowing America to even think that? Says in December 2003, forensic investigators extracted enough material from a mixed blood sample found on JonBenet's underwear to establish a DNA profile. That's one thing I didn't know. They found mixed blood sample.
That's weird.
So, right. So are you saying there was more than two people involved, or is this mixed blood A, part JonBenet, and B, part intruder? It says that DNA belonged to an unknown male person and excluded the DNA of each of the Ramseys. The DNA was submitted to the FBI's Combined DNA Index System, CODIS, which the FBI said they couldn't put Jack in, which I thought was absolute asinine. Jack's been criminally arrested. Jack's done time in jail. Why can't his, and if we are finding a match in the handwriting between him and the Zodiac, why can't it be compared? That's literally, how come, let me take this back a step. How come they can use DNA like the Ancestry.com or 123andMe to go back through history to identify somebody not even involved with the crime, to track back forward to bust somebody, but they can't put Jack's DNA in the system, at least as I'm told.
Yeah.
Says in October 2016, a report said that new forensic analysis with more sensitive techniques revealed that the original DNA contained genetic markers from two individuals other than JonBenet. Did you catch that?
That doesn't make sense. Two
other. So that's what I've been saying, is that this was a group effort. This was not a singular effort. This was not one person. There are more people that are involved here. It says A. James Kohler, who was a lead investigator for the DA's office, said that there were additional traces of male DNA found on the cord and paintbrush that Boulder District Attorney Mary Lacey did not mention, and that there were 6 separate DNA samples belonging to unknown individuals that were found by the test. Former FBI profiler Candace DeLong believes that the DNA, having shown up identically in several different places on multiple surfaces, belongs to the killer. So this means that the DNA they've identified on the underwear, they've identified on the Garrett, and they've identified in multiple other places, but this person is unidentified. Former FBI profiler Candace DeLong believes that the DNA... I read that. Former Adams County, Colorado District Attorney Bob Grant, who has assisted the Boulder DA's office in the case for many years, also believes that the DNA evidence is significant, saying that any resolution of the case would have to explain how the DNA showed up on several pieces of JonBenet's clothing. Forensic pathologist Michael Baden said trace amounts of DNA can get on places and clothing from all different non-suspicious means. There is no forensic evidence to show that this is a stranger murder. What? So this goes back to the water bottle with, Dennis had indicated a water bottle with Denny, which is Jack's son, had shown up at a crime scene where a woman had been murdered on the side of the freeway. And the FBI stated that could just be because he drank off the bottle as he was driving by and happened to huck it out the window at the same point where this dead woman lay. So then how come Joseph DeAngelo was found guilty? Could that not also be the same type of circumstance? You know, what proof do you have that he actually killed these people or had raped these people? Well, I don't even know if they did any tests on the rape because they never talked about the 50-some rapes. Either way.
Yeah.
The talk about the stun gun comes from these marks that are found on JonBenet's body. So with the blood stain on the panties, she's wearing underwear that are too big and not hers. Did these underwear come from someone else? I want to say that Patsy had indicated that she had kept bigger pairs of underwear for other of JonBenet's friends who might come over and need underwear. To me, that was extremely odd.
That is odd.
I get having enough money to supply things, but I never, with my children growing up, and I had all kinds of kids around the house because of their friends, never once did I ever think I needed to keep an extra pair of underwear on hand for them. Yeah. So these marks, one on her face, I'm not sure where this one is at, but there were 2 sets of marks. And when they lined those marks up, they were very consistent. So here, I'm guessing that this is the 2 sets right here, where she had been purportedly stun gunned twice. Otherwise, I don't think they have an explanation for these marks, or at least I haven't seen any. So it shows that there are blood stains from her shirt, blood stains from the panties, blood stains standard from a swab with saliva, right and left hand finger samples from the tape, and blood stains from the white blanket. So there's a lot of blood or trace blood evidence, I would have to say, because she didn't bleed out from her head. Like they said, there was a limited amount of blood in her brain from the actual skull fracture because she was already dead when she took the blow. Thus, there was no profuse bleeding that had occurred. So where is this blood that's coming from on all these items? Another shot from the docuseries. In addition, one end of the paintbrush was never found. Why hide this and leave the garret? So that's another great point. Why would you hide that third piece that she was sexually assaulted with, but leave the garret?
Who knows?
Questions to ponder. I don't think you would. I think if you were the parents that had done this, you would have gotten rid of all of that evidence. If that's what you did, was get rid of any evidence, you would have gotten rid of all of it.
Why not? Yeah.
Kind of like the duct tape, like the cord, and like the bludgeon. So let's see, whose presentation is this? This is an example of the other side of the case. This is simply a look at the other side of the coin. So this is somebody who's playing devil's advocate in regards to the evidence. And it says, first, some general observations. The handwriting comparisons are not evidence against the Ramseys. The comparison excludes John as the author. Patsy would have to be a complicitor in any sexual assault for her to have turned around and wrote this letter, right? She would have to have been a part of what was going on for her to then try to cover it up by writing this letter. Chet's inconclusive opinion weighs in their favor, especially with the expert's opinion that she probably did not write the note. The statistical belief that parents are the most likely suspects. Statistically, child abduction murders, of which this fits the definition, are much more likely to have been committed by strangers. Study conducted by the Washington Attorney General and the Department of Justice and quoted by the FBI. The pineapple photo. The pineapple is not evidence that the Ramseys were lying. What is in the Tupperware? Is it in the stomach generally 2 hours? Is it then in the small intestines 3 to 24 hours? Dr. Michael Graham said it could have been eaten the day before. But then again, somebody would have had to have fed it to her. So why didn't the maid or the Ramseys or somebody speak up and say, oh, yeah, I gave her that yesterday before we went to the Christmas party, or we're gone all day for Christmas, or whatever that reasoning might be. The diagram photo, the security of the house and snow on the ground is not evidence against the Ramseys. There were at least 7 doors or windows that the police found unlocked. Reichenbach's report says the snow was only on the grass, not around the areas where the intruder could have entered. And at the meeting with Dr. Lee Reichenbach says he does not know if, I cut that off and didn't pick up the other half of it. Either way, watching the docuseries once again and watching them pick apart the fact that the media just ran with, oh, there's snow and there's no intruder footprints, when it was a very light dusting that was even on the grass, and it only happened to be in one area. And most of us know that once the sun comes up, usually a light dusting is going to melt and go away unless it's in the shade. So I would also counteract with, what side of the house does the sun come up on, and where would we anticipate to still see snow at that time of the morning, based on the fact that the sun hadn't made it over the house yet to melt down that snow. Again, it's not anything conclusive that states that the parents were responsible just because there weren't footprints in the snow, if there's no snow around the areas where they claim that the intruder could have gotten in. Terry Batcher actually did the redundant patterns of 7, 11, and 21 blackjack, which I see some of his emails every now and again, and he's still finding this stuff on through the Idaho murders and Antifa and all of them. I'm not saying he's wrong, folks, by any means. I do understand that what I'm claiming is 60 years worth of dastardly business, all done by the same group. There's nothing to state that this group ever stopped, just like most of your government programs, i.e. Artichoke, Bluebird, Paperclip, MK Ultra, Midnight Climax. I'm telling you about a program that was tried and true, given different names, because every time somebody discovered the program was going on, they'd shut it down, rename it, maybe even possibly move it to another location, what have you, different players. And they just continue that same business. And we've seen that happen all the way into the early 2000s, as far as some of the statements that are being made by people who have committed crimes who believed that they were part of this program. And I think there's a good chance Maxwell as a socialite was also a socialite for the MK Ultra program. I mean, how else do you get brainwashed into believing what you're doing is okay? And how do you get protected? Either way. Terry Batcher did a rundown on the SBTC. He kind of gives you an idea of how he used the A to 1 conversion of the alphabet to come to this particular latitude and longitude. He's much better at explaining it, but bottom line is what he came up with is this is Garrett. This is the crossing, basically, of where this ends up lining up with Garrett and Burke Street. I think that's oddly coincidental. How do you
use Burke's the name of the brother?
Yeah.
Wow.
And Garrett was the device that was used.
Yep, that's odd.
So is he saying that this is going to be our patsy? Is this his neat little way in the ransom note to put together who they're going to call out for this and how they're going to handle this situation, especially with the media? Maybe, maybe not. But for him to come up with this latitude and longitude and then just pop it into GPS or navigation on the computer and find out that and by the way, this is in Michigan, where the second home is.
Okay. Interesting.
Well, again, just another one of those coincidences that latitude and longitude maps back to Michigan and then to a location that is between Garrett and Burke Street. So yeah. Well, it gets even stranger when we get into John Mark Karr, but the autopsy report, JonBenet autopsy, revealed critical details about her cause of death. The report indicated she suffered a skull fracture and strangulation. Bruising and abrasions were found on her body, suggesting a violent struggle. And who didn't hear this? Now, I get it. The basement's pretty low when you're living on the third floor of any building. Is there a possibility that that's why they needed the stun gun to continue to subdue her while they committed their acts? The coroner noted evidence of sexual assault, a controversial finding that influenced early theories about the crime. Time of death was estimated between 10 p.m. on December 25th and 2 a.m. on December 26, 1996. Trace evidence collected during the autopsy includes fibers and hair samples. These materials have been subject to ongoing analysis as forensic techniques improve. The DNA evidence and technology. DNA evidence has played a central role in the investigation. A small amount of male DNA was found on JonBenet's underwear and her long johns. So that's the location of this male DNA. This DNA did not match any family members or known suspects. Advanced DNA techniques have allowed for more detailed analysis of this evidence. In recent years, genetic genealogy has emerged as a promising tool for identifying the DNA source. Experts have debated the significance of the DNA evidence. Some argue it belongs to the killer, while others suggest it could be the result of contamination or transfer. But if everybody was tested, anybody who was a suspect, I'm sure they tested friends and family, anybody else that was there that day. If it's not matching any of those, then how is it contamination or transfer? I think everybody would have been ruled out that had an opportunity to go around it, right?
Yep.
In something as large scale as this was. I did capture this off of the internet way back in 2013. This was in regards to John Mark Karr, and it does have a URL up there at the top. I found that the links are broken, does not take you back to this. Actually, I found several of the links that I had associated to articles on John Mark Karr had been broken. no longer exist, are gone, even went to the Wayback Machine. And now all of a sudden the Wayback Machine is not performing anymore either, which I thought was an even more tell that we can't go back and see what was on the internet at this point in time, because they've now made that site unavailable, basically. So it says Karr at the Boulder bus station, 12/26/96. And the question,
who's Dan Pride?
This is a eyewitness to somebody getting on the bus that night in Boulder, Colorado. So Dan Pride claims to have seen John Mark Karr on a bus leaving Boulder near midnight at Christmas of 96, and to have contemporaneous proof of having talked with Karr. However, he describes Karr as being 5'11", which was closer to Jack's size, when he in fact is only 5'6". I don't think you can make that mistake. 5'6", 5'11". Like, I want to know how tall Dan Pride is for him to have guessed 5'11" when John Mark Karr is only 5'6".
And it contradicts itself. It says emaciated, pot-bellied, thin. How are you thin and pot-bellied?
Right. Okay, so I hadn't read that yet. Moreover, internet poster Henrietta McPhee, Post 11, asserts that before Karr came onto the scene, Reed's original website first posted in 2002. So this guy, I don't know who Reed is, but it's whoever's posting this information in regards to Dan Pride. In 2002 stated that Dan Pride, and this was what I was more interested in, was his original eyewitness account, said the individual I asked for a cigarette light, which means he's a smoker, as is Jack, that night was 35 to 50 years old. That's a big range. Old, emaciated. I don't know. All right. So pot-bellied, thin, about 5'11", and really terrified of something. Perhaps just a schizophrenic having a bad day. Perhaps someone who did not want to be seen. His physique reminded me of my father's after years of congestive heart failure. Vaguely cowboyish. Back to Jack. He looked sort of like McReynolds from a 2-second flashed TV photo I saw years later after he died. I don't know who McReynolds is, but they go on to say McReynolds had a large white beard. That's not John Mark Karr. He had brown hair, and I didn't even actually ever see him with facial hair, so who knows if he could even actively grow a full beard. Right. And was much older than Karr, so it is difficult to believe Reed could have so substantially forgotten what the person he saw looked like. So now she's flipping over to saying...
Who was Karr in the first place?
John Mark Karr is the person who took credit for JonBenet Ramsey's murder while he was in Thailand. He claimed that he was responsible for it. They arrested and extradited him. I saw pictures, again, in those fabulous tabloids of him drinking champagne, smiling on the plane, not even in handcuffs, with the individuals who were bringing him back. So they were making it appear as though through those tabloids that John Mark Karr was receiving treatment that was less than what a killer of a 6-year-old child should be receiving. And I agree with that. Why would he be drinking champagne or what looks like champagne in a glass and celebrating anything on his plane trip back?
Right.
Let's see. So now she's saying McReynolds is the person who... So they went from saying Dan Pride claims to have seen John Mark Karr and spoke to him. Then it goes into a statement in regards to McReynolds had a large white beard and was much older than Karr. So it is difficult to believe Reed could have so substantially forgotten what the person he saw looked like. Okay, so Reed, I'm sorry. We've got a difference here between Reed and Dan Pride, and I'm not sure, because then they hop back into Pride himself in an August 18th, 2006 letter to the Boulder DA acknowledges, as a witness, I have credibility problems up the yin. I believe you would not want me involved. However, with all the attention, you should be able to locate others on the bus that night. It was packed. If I can be of help, of course, I would be willing to. But as I said, you will be better off with another source. He further explains, my reference to credibility issues was a reference to this site. While every single word is correct and true and the events have happened exactly as described, it is, of course, a defense lawyer's dream. A prosecutor would have to spend extensive effort to prove every word, and then by the time he got done defending his witness and proving the credibility, the focus of the trial would be lost. So that's this person's take on what would have happened had he stepped forward and given any eyewitness account to this person climbing onto the bus that night.
Okay.
And I want to say that it was a Greyhound bus was the research that I collectively remember.
So Karr was in Thailand when he confessed. Who did he confess to? Oh, Thailand police. Okay.
We're going to get that. We're going to get that.
Okay.
Hopefully, we're going to move into it rather quickly because we are now at John Mark Karr. So some of the notes that I put in here was the Charlevoix address. Access Graphics was the name of John Ramsey's business. It was bought for pennies on the dollar. After this was perpetrated and happened, General Electric, who we know have been heavily associated with Jack, purchased John Ramsey's business for pennies on the dollar. Mary Lacey cleared the family of DNA in 2008. John Mark Karr turned himself into the Thailand police. I show August 17th on here, but I think it was August 15th. Either way, it was approximately 7 days after Jack pulled his own air tubes and expired. There is a letter that's mailed from Thailand and from Malaysia, which were supposed to be mimics of the anthrax attacks that happened on 9/18 of 2001. So we want to keep that premise in mind right now. John Mark Karr is in both the areas that 2 fake anthrax letters mimicking the 9/11 events or the 2001 events, attempting to portray that the suspect for the anthrax letters has left the country and is now mailing them from other locations. But John Mark Karr also happens to be in those locations.
Now, is that a picture of John Mark Karr?
Yes, that was before he became a woman.
Oh, great.
Which is going to be another one of these things we have to talk about, clearly. Evidence that John Mark Karr knew. Scent of perfume and a runny nose seemed to be the validating evidence of being present at the crime scene. The bracelet she was wearing, another pertinent piece of info from that night. The panties and cutting of the hair that was taken. So these are some of the items that I pulled out of a email exchange between John Mark Karr and a reporter or journalist, Michael Tracy. So now we have another media insertion that is actually having, I think it's about 4 or 5 years of communications via email with John Mark Karr while he's out of the country. The pedophile theory that's surrounding this case, and I'm going to show you some articles that kind of back up what I say, but the gist of it is that John Mark Karr was arrested in Sonoma County for child pornography on his computer. He was a substitute teacher, and somebody must have told on him, or somehow they were able to find these pictures. He was arrested. He was put in jail. He was in jail for 5 months. 45 days before his trial, he was released. When he was released, this man left the country, hopping over first to Malaysia, then to Thailand. And in the order that the letters not only were mailed to fake the anthrax attacks, but also in the same order in which letters purportedly from the Zodiac was being written to Tom Voigt, acting as though the Zodiac was out of the country. So now do you see my triangle there?
Kind of.
Anthrax being mimicked, Zodiac being mimicked from 2 locations where John Mark Karr was, who then turns around and claims to have been the killer of JonBenet Ramsey.
No.
That's a big coincidence, Nolan. Yeah. I know you like to play that devil's advocate. I don't have enough evidence to suggest. Yeah. I'm sorry, that's way too big of a coincidence. And then 1 week after Jack dies or takes his own life, basically, John Mark Karr admits to killing JonBenet Ramsey publicly and is then extradited back to Boulder, Colorado. Well, he's extradited back to Los Angeles first. Again, why Los Angeles? We have a lot of the happenings for these cases in Los Angeles. But why Los Angeles when he's being extradited back to Boulder, Colorado, where the crime was committed? But he comes back to Los Angeles first. Then they extradite him to Boulder, Colorado. They find that he doesn't match the handwriting. He doesn't match the DNA. And the inside information he has is not explained really by anybody other than they try to tell you afterwards that everything that he knew was public knowledge. Well, he knew a lot I did not know. From all the research I've done, I couldn't find things like what bracelet she was wearing, what perfume she had. You know what I'm saying? These things were not, I don't think, public knowledge. And if they were, somebody please show me where these articles are. So this is actually an article over here to the right from a significant other that had actually been with John Mark Karr. It says, man who claimed to have killed beauty queen JonBenet Ramsey suspected of recruiting children to be sex slaves. Right. The man who falsely claimed he killed child beauty queen JonBenet Ramsey is running a cult to lure in girls as young as 4. It was claimed last night. John Mark Karr has founded a group called the Immaculates to recruit young children to be his sex slaves, his ex-fiancée Samantha Spiegel says. So this was somebody that he was about to marry, which kind of gets sick because she is pretty much a Ghislaine Maxwell type individual, as we'll hear as we go through this. Right. Says he already has a string of followers who are giving him food and shelter, and to avoid police attention, he has become a woman. Why would you have to become a woman to avoid police attention? You're still going to be John Mark Karr. Change your breasts, change your junk. I don't care. You're still going to be John Mark Karr. So it says Miss Spiegel, 19, by the way. Now, John Mark Karr is like 40-something years at the age that he, I believe, turns himself in for killing JonBenet, is now set to marry a 19-year-old. Says Karr loves having sex with children and sees it as something which is healthy for him to do. JonBenet was found dead at her parents' home in Boulder, Colorado, 1996. Karr confessed to 10 years later, and despite a graphic confession, his DNA did not match that held at the crime scene, and he was condemned for being an attention-seeking eccentric. Miss Siegel met him shortly afterwards and got in touch because she wanted to help him. I think I was just thinking that he was misunderstood, she said. He was a victim of his childhood, of his family, of everybody, and that he needed to be saved in some sort of way. In an interview for US TV New York network NBC, Ms. Spiegel said that their relationship escalated quickly, and when he proposed, she accepted, only to be drawn into his sick world. She was completely under his control, and when he asked her to recruit young girls for him, she agreed. I started doing it, she said, explaining how she would size up children in the street and thought of recruiting her own niece and the young children of friends. He was so She's a freaking whack. I thought it was okay that he needed it for his health. I want to vomit. This is so Maxwell all day long. And we're just seeing another version of it, really.
Wow.
He was so persuasive and manipulative, and it was a family he wanted, and I didn't want to get in the way of something he wanted. She did not think anything was wrong because she was so brainwashed. And thought having sex. Yeah, and thought having sex with children was good for him. It just seemed like it was healthy for him. Why keep him from doing something he loves in a sick way?
Wow.
This fucking person. Oh, man. All right, so I got a couple pictures here. This is John Mark Karr transforming from the picture we saw before into this next version, which I think is probably somewhere in between the transgender change, and then, of course, to the woman that we see there on the right. I thought, well, it says, since they split up, she has sought a restraining order against him due to a series of sick notes he sent her. One read, if you cost me my little girls, I will hunt you down and kill you, while another said, I only kill the girls I love the most. Police, however, have been unable to find where he is, and reports in the U.S. media claim he could be in California with his own cult. It is also reported he has undergone a sex swap operation and now is called Alexis Valoran Reich. Ms. Spiegel said his mission is to create a cult called the Immaculates of little girls that would have sexual relationships with him and do whatever he wanted and be his little minions. Yeah, absolutely disgusting. Child porn charges drop. This is where things get interesting. So Santa Rosa, California, John Mark Karr was freed Thursday after a judge dismissed child pornography charges against the one-time suspect in the JonBenet Ramsey slaying because prosecutors didn't have enough evidence to take the case to trial. Judge Renee Chateau ordered Karr released immediately, bringing an end to his 2-month odyssey in the U.S. criminal justice system after he was extradited from Thailand in the Ramsey case. He left Sonoma County Jail, flanked by his attorneys, and rode off in a black Volvo SUV. Karr, 41, had been extradited to Sonoma County last month after DNA evidence cleared him of the 1996 slaying of the child beauty queen in Boulder, Colorado. The Sonoma misdemeanor case fell apart. They say misdemeanor. Is child pornography a misdemeanor?
No.
Okay. So that's just, we're being mediaized again.
Yeah.
Misdemeanor case fell apart when sheriff's investigator admitted losing vital computer evidence seized from Karr in April 2001 when he was working as a substitute teacher in Sonoma and Napa counties. Defense lawyers tried unsuccessfully to get the charges dismissed and were seeking to have evidence barred from the trial when prosecutors said they couldn't establish when the child porn images had been downloaded onto Karr's computer. Who cares when? Who cares when? Like, what is what?
Yeah.
They're there. Prosecutors were seeking a conviction to force Karr to register as a sex offender, but even if they had been successful, they said Karr would not have served any additional time in jail because he had spent several months behind bars awaiting trial in 2001 before he was released and fled the state. So child pornography only carries a 5-month sentence?
Not anymore.
They're considering that time served. Let's see. Karr had been on a lam until his arrest in Bangkok, which created a media sensation when he told reporters he was with JonBenet when she died. In Sonoma County here, and I've heard 2 versions of this. One, he walked into the Thailand police department, turned himself in, claiming to have killed JonBenet Ramsey. Another is that he got himself as a job as a teacher, and they discovered that there was either child pornography or he had committed some type of a child crime, and that's why he was arrested, then took in to this police station, and then once in the police station, then made the obvious statements that I'm the killer of John Mark Karr, but of JonBenet Ramsey. By the way, he had been claiming this to Michael Tracy, an investigative reporter or journalist, for 4 years before walking into the police department to do this. So there is some type of perpetration that's going on here, some type of misinformation to skew everything, and John Mark Karr is definitely a part of it. Karr had been on, in Sonoma County hearings over the last 2 weeks, the defense had accused prosecutors of misconduct for not alerting a judge sooner that evidence was missing. The defense also said the search warrants were based on an unreliable witness with a history of mental illness. Sheriff Bill Cogbill said that he accepted the prosecutor's decision to drop the charges in light of the current evidence standards and legal technicalities. We do acknowledge that there were some performance issues 5 years ago when we worked this case, Cogbill said in a statement. Okay. Where there's performance issues, but you arrest and jail somebody for 5 months pending trial?
Right. And then they lose the evidence? Is that what?
And then yes. So basically, after being acquitted of JonBenet Ramsey's murder because the DNA and handwriting and everything did not match, he then was extradited back to Sonoma County to face the original charges that he absconded from. And that was the child pornography in Sonoma County, which also happened to be very near the polyclass thing. And the Santa Rosa hitchhiker murders. So there's just the circle is so tiny and so tight. The coincidences are not just coincidences. We do acknowledge that we are conducting an internal affairs investigation into these issues, and we're continuing an audit of our evidence handling procedures. So now the cops are up for investigation for the loss of this particular evidence. I don't think the evidence was lost, not in 5 years. I do believe that evidence is lost in the Zodiac case because it's been 50 years, right? We know that detectives have walked away with letters and evidence has gone missing. But in a case that is only 5 years old, they claim to have lost the computer that had the child pornography on it.
Great.
Yeah. Let's see where we're at now. I still got about a minute here. The spokesman review, Karr was suspect in 2001. This gets even more interesting. Case was Karr's attorney, said that she did not know the depth of the investigators' suspicion in 2001 that her client, John Mark Karr, could have had a role in JonBenet's death. But she said it seemed somebody dropped the ball. She said that she was not contacted by law enforcement officials from Boulder and that no one sought to test her client's DNA to determine whether it matched evidence from the Colorado crime. It never went anywhere, she said. Marie Case, who represented Karr on the 2001 misdemeanor charges, said Friday that members of the Sonoma County Sheriff's Department mentioned to her at the time that there was possibly some involvement in the Ramsey slaying 1,200 miles away in Boulder, Colorado. Just saying, hey, we're looking at this guy. So how in 2001 did they have any inclination whatsoever that John Mark Karr was involved with this? Out of the blue, 1,200 miles away. They couldn't do a link analysis on many of these crime sprees that they tried, yet they turn around somebody up for misdemeanor charges as being looked at for this crime 1,200 miles away. And his attorney was told this in 2001. On Wednesday, Sonoma court records show a California Superior Court judge granted prosecutors requests to seal the police reports that had led to Karr's arrest on the child pornography charges. The porn charges were lodged against Karr. We're over time. Oh my gosh, I'm going to have to come back with this. I'm glad we got through majority, but I'm hoping everybody's starting to see the keen interest that I have in John Mark Karr, the misinformation that's being given, the things that they were able to get away with. And we'll talk more about that when we get to the anthrax letters and to Tom Voigt's letters. I hope everybody had a wonderful Thanksgiving. Have a great weekend, and we will see you all next Friday. Thank you, Nolan.
Bye.